And so just come in 2 chairs and we will start presenting. Is there anyone who hasn't sent it to me yet in the room?
Is there anybody who has not sent it yet?
To LB Carrera, please.
And then those of you who are on Zoom are fine to present it on Zoom, and it will be on the Zoom screen. You just share your screen. And I am recording, for better or for worse, for posterity. So I think we need to be in a room with 3 screens. One for OWL, one for presentations, one for my computer. So you guys are going to go so that you can boogie. Jerry, did you get them to go to the presentation? Are they going to the meeting with you? Okay, excellent. So I'm just going to go on the order that they end up on the screen that Louisa has so kindly loaded for us. And you guys can go manage it with. Okay. Do you guys want to see the PowerPoint or do you want to see the presenters?
It would be great to see both, but I think we prefer to see the PowerPoint, I think, guys. Is that true? Yeah, okay.
Nope. You're going to have to hit close on that. There you go. You guys are amazing for your flexibility. Thank you. Okay.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Josh Golofko. I'm working with Tommy Lauren McGinnis this summer and Dr. Jerry Shareko of the Randolph College History Department. And we're going to be presenting our preliminary presentation for our project titled Assessing Virginia's Monument Landscape. All right, so just to give everyone an idea of the importance of this research. So after the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and countless others, there were many movements of social justice that sprung up across the country. And this included efforts to remove Confederate and racist iconography, and it was a lot of renewed efforts around that. So the lost cause narrative has been maintained by Confederate heritage groups, such as the Daughters of the Confederacy around the country, which in turn has been romanticizing the efforts of the Confederacy since 1865. We should be aware of the names and figures of the Confederacy that are being preserved around the country, as well as the shifting discussions to address their preservation in Virginia and beyond. These questions must be asked throughout our research. Do racist and Confederate monuments further entrench our society in white supremacy and systemic racism? And what is the best way to address the racist past of the United States?
Thank you, Josh, for introducing the importance of our research. So to move a little bit into the nitty-gritty side of things, these are our research methods. So obviously, thank goodness we're able to travel now. Thank goodness for all the wonderful improvements with COVID that we've gotten, so we can go across the state and really see these places. Instead of doing Zoom all the time, we'll be able to meet with activists, public leaders, people who work at the monuments, and all of these things to really understand the diverse landscape of the Commonwealth's monuments. But it's not just going to be monuments in these areas. It's going to be places like college buildings. It's going to be like other monuments, places that are like named after things. So it's not limited to just the monument landscape. So we may also use Zoom in the cases of, since we're so proficient with it now, to places that may be a little bit too far, that might be just easier to speak over the phone. This weekend, we're actually going to begin our research in my hometown of Danville, Virginia, to see the Danville Museum of Fine Arts and History, the way they have really changed their progressive landscape in there. But we're also going to talk to the right-wing protesters that sit outside with Confederate flags. So we're going to get to see all of the diversity.
Confederate monument statistics. So some of you may know that the Southern Poverty Law Center is an awesome organization. They put out a lot of awesome statistics every year. And they reported in their Whose Heritage data report, and it found that 160 Confederate symbols were removed in 2020 alone. And Virginia was actually the national leader around the country with 71 removals. So yay for us, but they were followed by North Carolina, Alabama, and Texas. This map here encompasses buildings, monuments, statues, highways, markers, schools, parks, military bases, etc. So controversy doesn't surround just monuments and statues, it also surrounds places like that. So, and you can see that though these things are centered mostly in the southeastern portion of the United States. They stretch as far west as Washington, Oregon, and California, and as far north as Maine. And like I said, military bases too are being discussed, changes to the names of those. Fort Lee in Virginia is the big one that has been discussed even in houses of Congress.
So actions being taken. As you can see here, this is just in 2017 when the Jones statue was removed from our campus. I think it's Josh and I's job as historians from Randolph College to continue this, to see Virginia as one of the leaders in taking down these monuments, reinterpreting, etc., to really dive into this and learn the knowledge from the far right to the far left to the very in between. It's our responsibility. So we would like to answer these 4 questions. Who should be remembered? Why are these monuments coming down? Who is leading the push to take them down? And who is leading the movements for and against monument preservation? Thank y'all so much for listening to our presentation. And then Josh's wonderful bibliography.
Just the one source.
Any questions?
Any questions? Dr. Licata?
So one of the things that I think is super interesting about the history of monuments is when they are actually also erected, right? Because oftentimes they're not put into place until some of the Confederate ones were put into place in the early 20th century with like the rebirth of the KKK. Are you also thinking about that, the way that white supremacy kind of was reasserted in the early 20th century, and the way that that tells a different story than just the history of the Civil War?
Yeah, so I've actually come across a lot of graphs and data about when monuments were being put up, and they, like you said, they were put up a lot during the 20th century, during the Jim Crow era. That was a big thing, and that's what people don't realize, I think, sometimes when they're trying to defend these monuments. Like, let's look at when they were put up. What's the meaning behind that? Even the one downtown in Lynchburg at the top of Monument Terrace, which is also problematic because it's right next to the police station, right next to the courthouse, and all those important institutions in our city. And it was put up, I think, in the late 1890s. So again, that's a very distinct moment in our history that I think needs to be noted.
Thank you so much. I love this part.
Yeah.
So great.
Thank you, Dr. Licata. Yes.
Let's say that how are you going to choose people who are against removing the monuments? Like, how do you find them? Do you find them through recommendations through Professor Schrader's connections, or through contacting organizations that are actively doing this, or just going to try to find people on the street at protests? What's your methodology for finding people to talk to ask their questions? Or at that event?
Well, for instance, like this weekend at my hometown, I see this every weekend. It's in very public spaces. So these are ones that I know of personally. But actually this Thursday, we're meeting with Kelsey Mulsey to understand how we can maybe look into like the papers and see where, you know, they have put their own names out to contact them. And there's actually another right-wing person here in Lynchburg who lives on Link Road, who we've already found and are going to try and reach out to them. So we're trying to dive into sources like newspapers, their own newsletters, to figure out like who's writing these things and if they'll even speak with us.
It'll be interesting.
Yes. To say the least.
Any other questions? Awesome.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
We're already on the desk. So.
Isabel, you ready? It's gonna be great. So you can either use this or you can use this.
Okay.
And it's right there in front of you.
Yep. All right. Hi, everybody. So I'm Isabel Stevens, and I will be doing a reproductive justice podcast with Dr. Ricotta. Yay, it works. Okay. So, so what is reproductive justice? This movement particularly highlights people of color and the unequal discrimination that they face, and it has 3 core tenets: the right to not have a child, the right to have a child, and the right to parent a child in a safe and healthy environment. This movement also encourages wider recognition of issues that are not considered by the majority feminist movement, which for purposes of analysis is the middle-class white women feminist movements. And this includes issues like abortion, which was a very big topic and still is a big topic in middle-class white women area. So white middle-class women particularly advocated to have an abortion. They wanted to have an abortion because doctors were not allowing them to do so, whereas people of color, particularly African-American women, were fighting against sterilization and forced abortions. Okay, so why is it important? Because it considers more than just the racial factor of discrimination. It considers economic, social, political, environmental, everything that you can think of under the sun in terms of discrimination. And why should you care? Because this movement talks about recognition of these issues that you've been seeing discussed, social justice issues that are seen in movements like Black Lives Matter and such. And it also refers to access to these services because abortion is illegal, or not illegal, sorry. Abortion is legal in the United States, but I would argue that the legality doesn't matter if you don't have access, and access is covered under geographic locations. A lot of abortion centers aren't necessarily near where people live, and also the cost increases depending on where you are at in your pregnancy when you choose to get an abortion. Oops, I went the wrong way. There we go. So we chose to do a podcast because we thought it would be more accessible to a wider audience, and in the spirit of reproductive justice, which is all about inclusion, we figured that this would be the best way to spread this message and these conversations. And we wanted them to be more conversational, not just like one voice. So yes, and we also wanted to incorporate the voices of scholars, activists, and members of the community so that it wasn't just Dr. Wakata and my voice that you hear in these episodes. So these are a couple of our topics. I'm not going to go through all of them because we do not have time for that. But I'm particularly interested in the last two, the LGBTQ plus community in reproductive justice and the disability community in reproductive justice, because these communities are so often ignored in history. And I think in the spirit of reproductive justice and inclusivity, that these topics and these people should be examined as well. Okay. Are there any questions?
Where will these podcasts be published?
We are publishing them on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I believe, correct? I think we might be looking for another platform, but yeah. But for sure, yes.
Please subscribe and listen. Rate and review.
I'm guessing that you might want what's the level of the audience on this?
So we have an episode where we can I'm so glad.
Hey, Dr. Courier,
Yeah,
we're getting a large amount of hiss from your end.
okay. I was actually wondering, the only way for you to hear them is if I keep my mic on?
It just started though.
Okay.
We have to
Yeah. We'll spin the wheel. And okay. Go again, you guys. All right.
sorry.
Okay, my name is Megan and this is William, and our project is America's Wars in Asia and U.S. Public Opinion from 1950 to 1975. So this is going to be a comparative history study. We're going to be looking at the Korean War and the Vietnam War and how the Korean War specifically affected public opinion for the Vietnam War. And this is going to be very important, especially for today, for present day conflicts such as the U.S.-China relations and the present day Israeli conflict.
First, again, I wanted to go over how we're going to use our resources. So first, we're going to be using a lot of think tank groups, like the first three are up here. RAND, for example, uses a lot of data and research for the armed forces. Oregon's another big one. Quincy does a lot of, as another think tank that's very against overseas military operations. So those are going to be our think tank groups, but we're also going to be using Gallup poll to actually get the base public opinion data. And we're hoping to meet up with a few scholars. Like tomorrow, we're going to be meeting up with Dr. Kim from the University of Manitoba. She's going to help us go through how to use archival information, specifically with the Korean War. So she's going to help us figure out public opinion data from that time period, as well as media sources to help interpret how public opinion was influenced from that as well. So my side of the project is going to be focusing on Vietnam as well as data analysis. So it's big with both these Asian wars is the domino theory, which is basically America's message as an empire saying why we're going into these foreign wars and America's position on it. So we wanted to be the ones influencing other countries in the world. And a lot of this public opinion is going to be on the social and cultural perspective of how Americans felt about America being that empire influencing other countries to be our Western ideas. So for my part of the data analysis, I'll be looking at public opinion, the changes with that, possibly looking as well as how media and policy influence public opinion, as well as wartime memory. So how in the Vietnam War, people have the Korean War as a memory in their head, whereas with the Korean War, people have World War II as one of the more recent wars in their memory. So how that influences their opinion, and as well as possibly historical events within these wars that also change public opinion from time to time.
And I'm going to be focusing on the Korean War, and so I'm going to be doing more of a textual analysis. And since I am going to be focusing more on the political side of it, I'm studying how the relationship between U.S. foreign policy and public opinion affects how America views wars. I'm going to be studying opinion pieces, newspapers, journal archives, and other sources to find out how both the press and mass media influence American opinion during war. And so my main goal for this is to figure out whether or not, or to what extent, American memories affect policymaking decisions later on. And we also are going to be visiting DC one of the last weeks of our research project. We're going to be visiting both the Korean and Vietnam War memorials.
Here's the Vietnam one. It'd be interesting to see how public opinion is shown through these artistic interpretations as well.
And when we're in DC, we're also going to be looking at the Library of Congress, the RAND Corporation, and the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, which is a think tank that deals with military operations and arms competitions. So we already have Professor Allen has already reached out to the Quincy Institute to schedule a meeting with them, and we're hoping to schedule a meeting with the RAND Corporation as well, possibly virtually, but possibly in person. And when we're at the Library of Congress, we hope to look at the Asian Reading Room to study their digital collection. That's all. Questions?
Are you going to be looking at the like biographies of like Magic Hoffman or any of the conference stuff?
We have not thought about those, or at least I haven't. So, but no, those would be good. We're looking at, I know William had one biography that you had talked about.
Yeah, through some of my connections through Lynchburg, I've interviewed Major General Max Guggenheimer as well. He's a very influential. His family's very influential in Lynchburg. And last I talked to him about his experiences in Vietnam, he helped to be the airborne division and actually assisted with the ARVN forces, which is South Vietnamese forces. And he seemed to have the view that we should not have been in the war in Vietnam, and that we were hoping to get from him. We would have to do an IRB process in order to actually get his opinion. which I have not started that process yet. But it would be interesting to see how he felt about other Americans' public opinion about the war as well.
Well, one of the things I love when I first heard about this project is so many Americans don't even know the difference between somebody who's Korean and somebody who's Vietnamese. And yet they have different cultures, they have different languages, they have different histories. And so you guys are touching on that as well. Like maybe some of this will alleviate a little bit of xenophobia too and not move everybody together because the two wars are very different. Yeah, and that was a huge thing that we're gonna be looking at is the fact that the Korean War affected the Vietnam War so much in American opinion during that time. That's great.
Kim, you wanna go?
Let me make sure I can share. Is that working? Is that working, Dr. Courier?
It's not showing up.
Okay.
Yeah, the online people are also not seeing anything.
Okay.
So none of you can see the share screen at the bottom?
I don't see any screen now.
What, Sarah?
I think you can see the screen behind you.
Do you see my screen at all when I share it?
No. So we're going to go on to somebody else. So
Okay.
you guys, you 3 students need to then send us the PowerPoints.
Maybe one other student. Yeah, because maybe it's just him.
No, they're all saying they don't see a share screen at the
I
bottom.
see a share screen button. Can I try to see if?
Okay, Kylie, you go then.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if there's something, Kim, just send it to us.
Okay.
Send it to Louisa.
Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, everyone's fine.
One second, sorry.
It's okay. Guys, I'm actually going to be reading some of what Michaela wrote for this because Michaela took ill this morning and is not even able to join via Zoom. That's how sick she is right now. So I'm going to read what she wrote and then fill in a little as we go. And Kylie is going to change the slides for me. Okay. All right, so here I go, pretend I'm Michaela. All right. For our research, we will be looking at the neuropsychiatric diseases that are associated with communication and/or social deficits by training a new neural network as a product of the interactions of mice. Specifically, both Kylie and I, Michaela, will be responsible for verifying the call segmentation detection of mouse vocalizations on spectrograms. Kylie will be running this data through a pre-existing program known as DeepSqueak to analyze the data, and I, with the help of Dr. Shank, will be responsible for building a neural network in TensorFlow, a Python library for building neural networks. All involved in this project will contribute to the training of the network. Okay. And next one, yeah. So here I'm going to go off script, off Michaela's script, and just tell you what's on the slide. All right. So the idea is to build a neural network that will better analyze these mouse vocalizations So there's already a network called Deep Squeak that we tested last summer, and it didn't do very well on the data that we were testing it with, which is we have terabytes of mouse data that has been hand analyzed, and it didn't work very well. So the goal of this summer is to see if we can do a better job, given that we have a lot more data to train a neural network with. Now, neural network is just a machine learning algorithm, and it's represented. You can see a little graph of a neural network, a little cartoon of a neural network here. Usually, there's a lot more of these little circle things. Can you see my cursor? No, that Kylie. Can you move the cursor around a little? So, like right here where it says hidden. Yeah. So those little circles represent neurons in the network, and they're connected to each other. And you put input, like the data from our mouse vocalization data, and the output would be the output basically would say whether something is a call or noise. And also it can also classify the mouse calls into different types. Okay. And next slide. Is that you, Kylie?
Yes. Okay. So
Yeah.
oftentimes mice communicate in the ultrasonic sound range, specifically between about 20 kilohertz to 200 kilohertz. And for humans, the highest we can usually hear is 20 kilohertz. So we must use computers to interpret the data and display it on what we call a spectrogram. On the slide just below the white graph, you'll see a black spectrogram. This graph is depicted in frequency versus time. The brighter the wave segment is, usually the louder it is, and the duller it is the softer that the sound wave was. Being a spectrogram, it portrays the data, including the background noise. So on this next slide, you should be able to see the tiny dots, and that basically shows the static. In order to obtain the data shown above in this one, so the blue graph, we had to use a program created by Dr. Shank to filter out the background noise. Likewise, this graph also shows the sound pressure envelope. Usually the hardest part when looking for communication data is knowing the difference between communication peaks and sound peaks for miscellaneous events. So if a mouse were to jump on the sidewalls, it could and its palms could cause a squeak. That would make it really hard because the high frequency would look similar to the vocalization frequency. As a result of this inconsistency, many researchers oftentimes have to manually listen to the squeaks to determine their specific cause. Why is this important? The main reason why this research is so important is because mice are usually good models for human diseases. They can help us better understand how diseases affect communication. So when studying mice, we often study those with specific genes that have either been inserted or taken out of their DNA. We do this in order to see what genotypes produce the specific phenotypes that we are looking to observe. To be more specific, by having mice with specific genes, we're able to observe this and study specific genes that contribute to diseases such as autism. These mice help verify the disease models that we already have. Therefore, by using the mice vocalizations, we can study and analyze diseases and possibly find solutions which can contribute to the study of these said diseases. Questions?
Can I ask a question? So the outcome variable of this deep neural network is disease?
No. Sorry, do you mind if I answer that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Answering as Michaela, sorry. No, so the output is going to be either it's going to be whether something, a section of the sound is a call made by a mouse or not, right? So that's the first level. And then the second level can be what kind of call is it, right? Although that's not that useful, it turns out. What kind of call is it? But it's basically meant to try to segment the data, right? Say, these are calls and these are not, right? Yeah.
So how is that going to be helpful for identifying diseases
Oh, it's not really identifying diseases, right? If you make a mouse model of disease, like say you make a mouse, you knock out a gene, and you're hoping that mouse is going to have an autism phenotype, right?
Okay.
Right, meaning like that it has all the symptoms of autism. Then that would be a good model of disease. It would be a good model of autism, but you don't know that. So when you knock out the gene, you may have to go do a bunch of tests, cognitive tests, behavioral tests, communication tests, social deficit tests. A lot of these involve vocalizations of the mice. And so they take, gigabytes of data and then have to analyze it. And that's where the problem comes in. Analyzing that data is often done by eye, by hand, and even sometimes by ear, by lowering the sound into the hearing range. It's hugely arduous and a big barrier of entry. And so if you can get a good machine learning algorithm to do that analysis for you, it would be a lot better for a lot of researchers.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Yeah.
We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, which aspect of the deep squeak neural network is in the most need of training this summer?
Do you want me to handle that, Kylie? Yeah, okay. It's more like, so the deep squeak network has a particular architecture of network, which just means like how they set up all the different layers. Can you hear me? Yeah. And so they set up the layers in a certain way. They're connected in a certain way. So that particular architecture, the first thing we're going to do is rebuild that architecture in Python because they use MATLAB. And we're going to train that with our data because they really didn't use a whole lot of data to train that network for mice. So we're going to train it with the more data you have. Often that's a limiter for neural networks is you need a lot of data to train it. And so we're going to retrain that architecture. If that does not improve the performance, we're going to try to build our own. It was really difficult actually to figure out what about the architecture of the neural network is causing your issue. So that's the hard part. So we're going to see how well it does when we train it with our data, which is really a lot of work. Like just to get to the point where you can do that is a lot of work. Anyway.
Thank you. Now you can hear us. So Kim, would it be better if I downloaded yours and then I shared it, or do you want to do it with the two screens?
It doesn't matter, whatever works best for you.
I can't minimize Zoom while I'm in the meeting anyway. So we're gonna have to put it on the screen behind me.
Okay. Are you ready? Right, well, my name's Kim Steele. Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. My name's Kim Steele, a sociology major minoring in psychology and gender studies, and my advisor is Dr. Courier. And we wanted to give special thanks to Randolph College's SRP program for making this research possible. We also wanted to give everyone a trigger warning. She and I are going to be studying intergenerational differences and narratives of those who are survivors of sexual violence. We won't go into graphic detail of the accounts in our study. However, we will talk about sexual violence. If this is triggering at all for you going forward or for future meetings, please speak to Dr. Curia, Louisa, or Erin for future presentations to come and how we can manage that. Your mental health comes as a priority. Okay, and then next. Our research question are, what are the differences of intergenerational narratives of sexual violence? As I mentioned earlier, we'll be studying intergenerational differences in narratives of those who have encountered sexual violence. Currently, according to RAINN, every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. So in my entire short presentation, the average of 3 people were sexually assaulted. We're looking at what their descriptions were when they initially occurred, as well as what they think today, with special interest in what has changed their perception over time with time and education and age. Next slide, please. Okay, so methodology, we have already completed and submitted and had our IRB approved. Next, we're working on scheduling and interviewing participants for their narratives. Then we'll collect, well, will be our collection of qualitative data in which we will code. And then we will be using grounded and feminist theories for our analysis. And then, yeah, next is just, we're excited. Any questions?
Are you developing the coding scheme yourselves, or are you using an established method of coding these kind of narratives that other researchers?
Okay, she said, are we developing our own coding scheme, or are we using what other people have previously done in terms of coding schemes and schematics? So either Kim can answer that or I can answer that. Okay, she wants me to answer that because I'm the qualitative methodologist. We're going to be doing both. There is a lot of research on this, a lot of research on how people talk about these things, what language they use, how they interpret it within the context of the culture in which they find themselves. And so we're going to be using some of what people have done before, but specific to the people we interview or get written narratives from. Grounded theory means that you let the data speak to you. You don't try to impose a specific, we're not doing like null hypothesis testing. We're saying, what are the patterns that we are finding from the people we talk to? And so this is just a very small part of the whole year of Kim doing research for her senior project. So we're still in the midst of, are we going to try and do 10 or 15 interviews, which is a lot in qualitative research. But that's why we want to see what they have to say. So it's a combination. Dr. Licata.
You said that you're going to look at some of the change over time, how their descriptions of the experience change over time. Are you also thinking about, and you said there's like education and different reasons that they may have made these changes in their narratives or the way that they discuss the experience. Are you also thinking about the ways that like perceptions have changed, like the Me Too movement, for example?
I'm going to let Kim take that one. She's like, wait.
So the question was if they're okay.
And that's okay. And how things like the Me Too movement have participated in this change.
Yeah, I definitely think it's notable, and we'll see that. We do want to see how things like Me Too and the public perception of sexual violence has kind of changed their narratives as well, or how they think about things.
Other questions? Okay. Ariadne? Is she there? Ariadne, are you ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. Can you share?
Let me try.
Danielle, why don't you just leave it on those speakers?
Okay.
She can speak up a little bit.
So leave the speakers on.
Yeah, don't plug in, don't plug in.
Okay.
Okay, so can you guys see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm assuming you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So our project is brand affiliation and hotel performance. This research is going to be conducted by Dr. Seyfuddin and myself. So the purpose of our research is to determine whether a hotel's affiliation with a brand affects its performance. We will be measuring performance and hotel revenue by using consumer reviews at different affiliations. So whether brand reputation or loyalty and or standards may be the cause for change between these different reviews. Prior research indicates that there is a positive relationship, so affiliation does increase hotel revenue, but our goal is to determine by how much. Our samples are going to be from Texas because this is the only state to report hotel revenue because of tax codes. Okay, so currently the overview of the tasks include data inspection and cleaning, which is where we are currently. Then we will survey literature related to this research, and then compile and create a master data set. And then from there, we will do data analysis and geoanalytics, run regressions and conduct robustness checks, and then write up the final project paper and we have a conference scheduled for June 30th, July 1st, and then prepare for the final presentation. So the goals of the project are to test our hypothesis on the topic, find how the other factors interact in this relationship, apply econometric things that I have learned this past semester from taking the course, learn data cleaning and analysis techniques. We hope to publish our findings in a scholarly journal. And my personal goal is to be able to better explain this econometric model that we have listed here. So I wanted to say thank you to Randolph for allocating resources towards this research and giving each student the opportunity to do this. And thank you to Dr. Seyfuddin for selecting me to do this research with him. Does anyone have any questions?
Dr. Shreka,
What inspired this project?
what inspired this project?
Sure, can I answer that question,
Of course.
Ariadne? Because so originally my original research goal from a different topic was actually involving the hotel industry to identify whether green hotels have any statistically significantly different revenue or performance as opposed to other kinds of non-green hotels. And as I was digging into that research topic much deeper, I realized by inspecting my data set that there are some hotels which had changed their ownership, and when the ownership of the hotels changed, the brands of the hotels also changed. And that is when actually I realized that maybe this is something interesting to investigate also, to see whether when the hotel's brand affiliation changes, do they see statistically significantly different performance in terms of revenue, price, or hotel's occupancy, things like that. So, and as I was investigating the data for my original research, I also noticed that these brand changes happen quite often among hotels, and on average it happens like 3 to 4 times in the total lifespan of a hotel, if you consider it 40 or 50 years, or probably a little bit more than that. So, I mean, in the literature, this topic has been widely investigated, but the econometric techniques used so far do not take into account the causal impact of brand affiliation changes on hotel revenue, and this is what we want to investigate specifically.
Dr. Warren, then Dr. Soika.
What variables are in your equation and which one you're most interested in understanding? Like that equation looks like, I don't know what each of the variables are.
Can you go back to the previous slide? Yeah, tell us what those are.
Okay, so we have the natural log of revenue, with I being the individual hotel and T being time. And then the beta brand IT is the coefficient for each brand. And then I have the information for the other variables, but I don't have it with me. If I could phone a friend here. So Professor, do you know?
Sure. The brand is a dummy variable, whether a hotel's brand affiliation changes or not. So if for Hotel I, the brand changes, the dummy variable changes from 0 to 1 at time period T. And then you have hotel-specific variables. I can't see exactly the slide. Give me 1 second. I'll have to move my screen a little bit. Okay. So Gamma I here indicates hotel-specific variables, which are time invariant. So these are, in other words, hotel fixed effects in econometric terms. And then I also include time variant variables. For instance, delta could include any features of the hotels that may vary across time periods or across months or years. And then the epsilon IT is the error term or residuals for hotel I in time period T.
So I'm assuming, just sorry to jump in, I'm assuming you're doing log of revenue just because to make it log normal, to hope they hope that's log normal. Is that true?
Right, exactly, yes. To normalize the variable. I mean, it could be skewed. Yeah.
Got it.
Did that answer your question, Dr. Wong? Dr. Soika?
I was wondering, is there a way to account for or normalize for renovations and things like that that are done at the time of brand change? Because at least the places that I've seen that have changed brands, they at least have to throw new paint on or something. There's typically some facelift, yeah, at that time. Is there a way to pull that out?
Could you hear that or do you need me to repeat it?
Could you repeat that?
Yeah,
We
she
didn't hear
said that are you accounting for, or is there a way to account for things like renovations that when brands change, as she said, they at least throw a new coat of paint on, they do at least a little bit of a facelift. So is there a way to take that out or at least account for the effects that that's going to have?
Yes. Theoretically, there are ways to do it. One is collecting time variant information, for instance, hotel review data, and this is what we originally planned for. But later, when we are inspecting further, we realize that on TripAdvisor or any other similar websites, when a hotel changes their brand, the reviews do not reflect or do not include pre-rebranding information. So a hotel changes its brand in 2013, all the reviews will only be from that time period and onward. And so this is one of the challenges, and to account for that, I know that there are other data available from hotel analytics market research companies. Like there is one company called Smith Travel Research, or STR. They have information such as whether the hotel had undergone any renovation or things like that. So if I can include that data as part of this regression model, then obviously that can be taken into account.
I also had a question. How are you accounting for the whole COVID thing? Or is that going to be part of the, just because hotels have not been stayed in very much for a year and a half?
Right. One way to account for that is have a dummy variable for the time period when the COVID hit, which is March, let's say, assumably March of 2020. And we can then impact how the short-term or intermediate-term impact of COVID on the performance of these hotels have been so far.
I think overall it'd be pretty small because we have some hotels that opened in 1799. So I think 1 year in the grand scheme of things is pretty small as well.
Mm-hmm. Did you hear what she said? Some hotels opened in 1799. Mm-hmm. Okay, other questions? Fabulous, thank you. Everybody at the top is on. Da, 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 da. Great pictures.
Hi everyone, I'm Annalise Presley. And I'm Daisy, and we're doing our research with Dr. Fab, and we're actually doing 2 different projects, but we're doing our presentation together right now just because our methods are pretty similar. So I'm doing the antioxidant properties of various cocoa powders, and Annalise is doing the antioxidant properties of nutrient-rich berries.
So antioxidants are really important biologically for the body because we're exposed to free radicals and reactive oxygen and nitrogen species, both by ourselves and from our environment. And these can induce us to have diseases like macular degeneration, diabetes, some cancers, etc. So what we are interested in is how dietary antioxidants, so antioxidants we consume ourselves, can help mitigate these diseases and these free radicals in our body.
So a lot of fruit and veggies that we know, are full of antioxidants. So berries, the specific ones they're pretty rich in are anthocyanins, which is the one in the bottom corner, and polyphenols, which is the structure in the top corner. And then chocolate contains polyphenols as well. And they also contain flavonols and catechins, which are also pretty antioxidant rich.
So I'm going to be specifically looking at nutrient dense berries, and nutrient dense berries are nutrient dense because they have high contents of polyphenols and anthocyanins. And what these do is they give them that really dark red color. And the interesting thing, what I was originally really interested about is goji berries. And goji berries are, Dr. Fab let me know about this. They're actually banned in the United States fresh because they have a very short shelf life, which I don't know why they're banned because of that, but they're interesting too because they're used medicinally in East Asia. And so I was interested in that. And then one thing we found too is that goji berries are a red color, but they don't have anthocyanins, which are that red, cause that red pigment. So they have phenolic amides instead. And that's what gives them that. So we have to find a way to separate that and isolate it out and test for it. And then I'm also going to be looking at dried and powdered berries instead of fresh fruits because it's too hard to get a hold on those samples right now. And being dried and powdered is going to affect how we can extract the antioxidants because of the processing.
So cocoa, it has a pretty long process before it actually gets ingested. It starts off with the bean, has to get harvested, washed, dry, processed, all that fun stuff. So because of that, it definitely loses value in antioxidants. And then cocoa in general also has a pretty high fat content, which actually does not have any antioxidants in it, which is why we're going to be separating that, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the next slide. And then it can also be processed in different ways. So one way that you've probably seen in stores, Dutch processed cocoa. So that what it does, it alkalizes the cocoa so that it's less acidic, so it's sweeter for us to consume. But because of that, it likely loses antioxidants, which we're going to see in our experiment. So we already began some of the lab stuff this week, which is pretty exciting. And as I said, because cocoa has a lot of fat content, we have to separate it with this thing called a sock slit. So it's kind of like a big cocoa or a big coffee filter. So we're going to put it through that, and it takes about 72 hours in other studies to separate the fat from the actual base that we're going to use to further separate into 3 different columns. And then we're going to do that to separate the specific antioxidants, which we're going to test in different assays.
So we have 4 different assays. They're called FRAP, DPPH, vanillin, and the folin. And so FRAP and DPPH are used for our antioxidant testing, and then our folin and our vanillin are used for the very specific anthocyanin and polyphenol testing. And so we've already prepared our reagents.
And then yesterday, we were doing some lab stuff, which is really fun. And so DPPH is a process that we did yesterday. And all of these, sorry. Yeah, we did FRAP yesterday, my bad. And which is what we see here. And it's what it is, it's this compound that, okay, so it's kind of weird because we have to make, okay, so all of these, let me go back a little bit. All of these assays, what we're doing is we're kind of comparing it to standards. So as Annalise was saying earlier, DPPH and FRAP, what we're doing is we're getting the actual antioxidant content of our stuff out. So we compare it to a standard. So for FRAP, we compared it to FeSO4, which is iron sulfate. Sorry, I think about it. I'm sorry. And yeah, so what we did yesterday when we made our standards, we had to make the reagents, which were these little things. And, oh, right there, the far left. And so the standard that we have, it makes it a darker color. And we have to graph the standard, which we did there. And as you can see by our R-square of 0.99, it was a really linear graph, and that means our standard is really promising. So when we do our own samples, we're going to compare it to this line. And we're going to have to do it again when we actually do it. But this was the one we did yesterday. And then, again, like we said, this is to do the content of antioxidants.
And then both of our projects are probably going to lean more to the TPPH, just because for me, it's more fat friendly.
And for me, it's really specifically for goji berries, since they don't have that anthocyanin and they have the phenolic amides instead. DPPH is a really good way to isolate and test that. So. So our lab is going to be full of pretty colors and good smells.
Yeah,
so.
definitely. Any questions?
All been processed the same way, whether you're looking at an unregulated antioxidant content from the same kind of original cocoa trees and beans and regions, but processed different.
So we're doing different processed cocos, and we're also doing some cocos that are different, like fat contents. So like we are looking at Dutch processed cocoa and then just regular cocoa, and then I believe one's like a 2010 and the other one's like 2020 with like fat normal cocoa. And then we're also looking at red cocoa, which I'm kind of excited about because I have like, I know it's like, I don't know, it's just really cool. I've never seen it. And then we're also going to be looking at the fat too, because like I said, fat doesn't have antioxidants. So when we're going to analyze our fat that we extract, to first make sure that our extraction is successful and to confirm the fact that it doesn't have antioxidants. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, of course.
By the way, all your products are so cool. That's why I'm asking so many questions. So I'm very interested. Okay. So will you have the opportunity to look into how some further processing in different ways may affect it? Like what if we dry the berries or what if we freeze them? Are you going to be looking into whether that changes the antioxidant content?
Yeah, so I'm testing different berries. I'm testing blueberries, blackberries, elderberries, goji berries, and acai. And so the thing about some of these is that we couldn't get our hands on like specific, like I guess, sample types. So my goji berries are just dried goji berries. The acai is just powdered acai. But then we can have powdered and dried blueberries and powdered and dried blackberries. So yeah. Any more questions?
At least with the berries, will you be doing the succulent extractions too, or is it just the cocoa side of the succulent?
So because mine are processed already like they are, I think I'm just going to be doing a column chromatography separation, because I don't think I have the same fats as she does. And I just put mine, mix it with methanol and we're good.
Let's spin the wheel. Good luck, you guys. We hope it goes really well. Thank you, Dr. Shareka, for giving them that experience.
We can make another announcement soon. If anyone's interested, 7 o'clock tonight, we can just stumble upon this. There is a town hall about African American history that's open to anyone. Who wants to see this? It's lynchburgva.gov.
Lynchburgva.gov. There's a thing at 7 tonight.
How do we remember the African American past? And B, should we be named history participating in the school? So that's going to be the 2 things. Lynchburgva.gov. That's where you can sign for it.
Well, and as Louisa is doing this, for the 3 of you, I don't know if you listened to NPR yesterday or this morning, there is a African-American historian who was interviewed for quite a while because he went to Washington and Lee. And he is now really questioning the whole like thing. So there are a few recent things on NPR that you could go back and listen to while you're walking, jogging, whatever. But before you leave, and this is for everybody, I am desperately trying to get students access to the student center to be able to work out, because several people have asked about like stress relievers. Unfortunately, right now, the task force is saying that you can use the MAC Center at from 12 to 5 on weekdays, and that's it. And so I'm pushing back saying our students are going to be working from 12 to 5. They need a place. So if any other faculty want to shoot an email to the task force and just say, we would really love our students to be able to work out, to do yoga, to meditate, to do in the student center. Just saying,
So 1 o'clock tomorrow here. Kelsey's and you were talking. about.
yes.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Good luck. Okay.
Sorry, we can just go on. I'll pick up later.
You'll get it later? Okay, so I can put the algae one back up?
Yep. Well, it's.
Okay, there it is. Okay, thanks.
So this is our project on algae. I'm Abby and I'm working with Allison, Professor Soika. And it's specifically characterizing benthic microalgae diversity in restored seagrass beds.
So we are going to study and research benthic microalgae found in and around the seagrass beds found in the eastern shore of Virginia. And so a short definition of what benthic microalgae really is organisms that live in the sediment of marine ecosystems. So benthic microalgae is like a conglomerate of various organisms found in the ecosystem. And so the vast number of species classified as microalgae have many differing functional roles. So for example, some are heterotrophs and some are autotrophs. So heterotrophs and autotrophs differ in how they find food. Heterotrophs consume other organisms and autotrophs produce their own via sunlight and photosynthesis. So the uncertainty of what should be classified as microalgae, benthic microalgae, takes away from its importance. So this is why we would need more specific classifications of the algal species itself.
So why it's worth knowing, why it's important, is that a lot of algae have different health benefits for people, and there's a lot of them put in use for medicines, and they're present in a lot of food. I think the most recognizable would be seaweed. It's a really healthy food source. They're also a major source of oxygen, and they are able to take up a lot of carbon from the atmosphere with their photosynthetic properties. They're essential for marine ecosystems, and they're a food source for a lot of marine species, and they're kind of like a backbone for a lot of marine ecosystems, and they're really understudied right now, which is kind of where we come in.
So the results we are intending to acquire are some characterizations of specific types of benthic microalgae, as well as how the restored seagrass beds affect the benthic microalgae found on the eastern shore of Virginia. Questions?
Yeah.
So you guys will be traveling to the eastern shore to see the algae or get to that?
Yes, we do, and it'll be next weekend. So
They'll have good weather.
yeah.
The same question, but I want to hear what kind of field work going to be doing at the Eastern Shore, what samples they're going to take.
We're mainly looking at diatoms. So when we go out, we're going to be on a boat, and we'll get the samples, and we'll come back and look at them under a microscope. And we're going to try to characterize them, or I guess to determine what species there are. But there's a lot, so it's kind of just going off the basic characteristics.
So later on this week, we're actually going to put together a chart or a graphic of the different things that we might see, and that will lead us to what benthic microalgae we found.
Is there any chance you might discover a species that no one has noticed there before?
There's no characterization of what species are there. I think it'd be unlikely for us to classify an entirely new one. There's no listing of what species there are already. First.
So you're gonna be big. But I was actually watching that and I was thinking, so basically we all should be eating chocolate, berries, and microalgae.
Microalgae named after us.
Other questions?
Get the last one in. No, I know, but. Okay.
Heat mapping.
Hi guys, I'm Michelle Starks and I'm working with Dr. Warren on Project Virginia Heat Watch, and where the focus is heat mapping to identify where we should put our priorities for community-based strategies to deal with the heat vulnerabilities in Lynchburg. And my focus on this project is to recruit and train our volunteers for the heat mapping campaign and to find community-based strategies that are able to deal with the heat risk within the city. And thankfully, people that we are already working with have given us promotional material to help recruit volunteers and training material to help train our volunteers to use these kind of really cool thermal sensors that our volunteers are going to drive around the city to collect data. And I'm also going to be reviewing recommendations that the spring 2021 Energy and Society class made with our urban heat island projects, and reviewing other recommendations that other programs and foundations use to focus on addressing their own cities' heat vulnerabilities. And hopefully in the end, which is going to come up a lot faster than I planned, I'm going to have the heat mapping campaign ready. We have a date between July 11th and July 20th, and the plan is for all the volunteers at we have 3 separate times that volunteers are going to go out on their own routes and map our heat islands and our heat risks. And also I get to basically develop a nice comprehensive list and plan of relevant energy community-based strategies for the city of Lynchburg to maybe acknowledge and recognize to address their heat vulnerabilities. And a lot of this data will become public in September when all the other colleges that are working on this finish theirs. And thankfully, it's not just Dr. Warren and I. Dr. Henry Stone from the University of Lynchburg and Dr. Lisa Power from Sweetwater College and their students are also working on this project with us. They may be working on different aspects, but it still wouldn't be as successful without them. And thankfully, we have outside funding and outside resources that are helping us throughout this process, such as Kappa Strategies, which is where we're getting our thermal sensors, Capital One, the Science Museum of Virginia, Virginia Department of Forestry, and the Virginia Foundation of Independent Colleges, where 13 out of 15 colleges are gonna also map their communities, hopefully at the same day. And so I hope it's gonna be just as successful. So thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Can you just very quickly, I know this is a long topic, what do you mean by heat vulnerability? Is that related to people or to things?
So yes. So earlier, and so it's becoming a much more increasingly popular topic. Urban heat islands are basically, I have a better picture to show. Urban heat islands are certain areas where the heat disparity in an area is greater than its surrounding counterparts. So say like downtown is much more likely to be hotter than its rural counterparts. So, and with that, it comes probably with environmental risk, health risk, socioeconomic risk, and a lot of other factors that come into play. So it's a really interesting topic.
I had one other question. And this, I know this is one part of a much larger project. Are they looking for volunteers who specifically have low energy use cars?
or do they not care? I was just thinking, I don't want like 50 plumbers driving around Pittsburgh with their seats stuff on.
Well, what we're doing right now, the way we're recruiting volunteers, for one thing, Maria Shibashi has a great idea that we should recruit families, so we don't have to swap out the devices between drivers, because we have 3 routes to go. We're not going to be putting restrictions on what kind of vehicle we have, but 18 and older drivers license and driver's record. But we are going to be recruiting from primarily, we're hoping for local students at all 3 institutions, and then we'll go to faculty and staff. We have 6 routes in Lynchburg, 2 routes that have 3 times a day for each, so we need up to 18 pairs of drivers, maybe 2 or maybe 6 that don't go out all the time a day. I think we probably won't discuss based on, if we had our choice, we'd be like, driving another vehicle, right? But they will have those signs in the window that says that they're doing good, that in relation to Dr. Curry's questions, this is passionate shades. I want to talk a little bit about the red line areas and how our research is helping to.
Yes.
discover whether risk is greater.
So Lynchburg, like a bunch of other cities, has had a history of redlining, which was 20th century, issue where basically certain areas will be cut off from people of color or those of worser socioeconomic opportunities. So those of rich white neighborhoods would be casted as good risk, while those of Black neighborhoods, Hispanics, poor people, they're not worth it. They're not worth the risk. And so a lot of that funding went into more of those good risk opportunities, while a lot of depletion, a lot of things fell apart within those redlined areas. So it's a heavy topic, but it's like very interesting.
But we'll find out. Some other studies have shown that red line areas in cities have the worst heat islands. There was just a big study that showed this earlier this year.
By
And
Hoffman,
we
yes.
did give the cabinet strategies, we gave them a shape file of our red line districts, and our routes will include that, so we'll be able to see the same thing. That the worst heat vulnerability is going to be in our historically red line areas, so that will kind of that we will have, and we can use that data to formulate this little strategy.
Yeah.
One more. Does this apply in the winter, or is this primarily when it gets really hot in the summer? Are they still
Right now in the summer, because you're going to get a lot more, your heat waves are going to be a lot more prevalent in the summer. And so it's going to be easier to map it then.
The heat islands are worse, are most pronounced in the hottest weather, because there's a positive feedback from the and so forth. So the cities are always a bit warmer, but they're more warmer in the summer.
Still why the red line areas are generally more likely to have hotspots?
Oh, because, okay, so, yeah, so also with the funding and, so they're a lot likely to be more paved areas, a lot more, you're gonna see a lot more black spaces rather than tree coverage. You're not gonna have all the anemones that those places that have funding have as well. So it's a lot of kind of factors like that. So it's a lot of exposure and a lot of the funding that come into it, and your energy use as well is what plays into that. So yes.
This is so fascinating. I haven't learned much about this. It's really interesting. In terms of the redlining, are you going to be looking at some of so the thing that came to mind are some of the issues around when there were extreme heats in New York City, and then there were
Yes.
shutdowns where like the electricity went
Like what
off.
happened in Chicago, yes.
So are you looking at some of that history to kind of?
I think it would be very relevant to look at those. So those are also within my priorities to look at those.
Those are like contextualizing this work. That's so fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, this project could be combined with sociology, it could be combined with what Dr. People has been doing for years with the high desert, scientific planning, and our data will be available to all.
Yes. So great.
So yeah,
It's awesome.
Thank you.
over a cold, so excuse my voice if it gets a little raspy.
So I'm Gabe, and I'm working with Dr. Warren and Brooklyn with the 500-Year Forest Foundation to expand on previous research in creating a inventory methodology for their 500-year forests. So the 500-Year Forest Foundation is a nonprofit that works together with private landowners in order to conserve their forests that they own and to increase public awareness to the importance of these forests while also maintaining the forests and helping to conserve them. Our project is to work with them on a topic that was previously explored in a previous summer research year and expand on their research by improving their inventory model so that we can better understand what is in these forests and how to best mitigate invasives and how best to conserve the forest itself. So beyond this inventory work, I'm also going to be continuing my work as an intern over the past few semesters in creating social media content via the YouTube channel that I made for them, and to really help increase the public awareness and get the public on board with why we really need to conserve these sites.
I will also be working with Danielle Radke, who is a board member on the foundation. And she's also the education coordinator at the Plater Nature Study Center. And so we will be designing and planning several different educational outreach programs for the year to come. And this is going to involve looking into events around Lynchburg that hopefully both Gabe and I can take part in and host a table at, as well as coming up with educational activities that we can provide at that table for whatever events that we attend. And I will also be helping create outreach materials such as social media posts, posters, flyers, etc., in order to get information out about the foundation and the importance of protecting old growth forests. This project would not be available for us, of course, without the support and funding of the 500-Year Forest Foundation itself, as well as the Oakdale Fund. And that's all we have. So thank you for listening. Questions?
Yes.
Have y'all ever seen the really big old red tree at the Plater Center yet?
I have not.
I have not seen that.
I'll have a real question.
We'll have to check that out.
We're hoping that they can go out and look around later with Danielle. That's a great example of a successional forest.
Yeah.
And yes, make sure you see the old growth tree, and then you want to see some of the rapids. Yeah, a field day at Plater is definitely good. You need volunteers for that? Well, it's serious. If you want to have an event day at Plater, they're great at doing, and it's such a great facility.
Yeah.
If we want to rate something that people can get their own transportation, we might do that.
That would be awesome.
Now we have
Dr. Silver.
Yes. And move on.
Sorry, Dr.
Mine, not a complete message, but what are you most excited about?
Personally, I'm most excited about going to the forests because I haven't been able to do that since last fall. So it'll be really nice to get back out to the forests.
I'm really excited about the field work as well, just because I like getting my hands dirty and I don't mind being out all day and that, but also just getting to know everybody from the foundation because I haven't met the people yet. So. Is that it?
Thank you.
Okay, we're getting the last presentation. I think we got it, Noah. Is that a picture of you?
No, wrong time.
Oh, that's very good.
Michael, you really did that?
Yeah, I was a diver.
Wow.
So I'm Noah Carney, and I'm working with Jillian and Dr. Penn on Vertex Algebras this summer. And hopefully by the end of our presentation, we'll kind of work our way up to what they are and how we're going to study them.
Where did this?
Okay.
So, we first wanted to start with some of the symmetries in nature. So we started out with the human body. We noticed it had a bilateral symmetry straight through the middle. And if you look at the honeycomb with the bee, you'll see very hexagonal symmetry. And then on the very right, you'll see art that's not symmetric, but it really draws your eye because it's not symmetric.
Yeah, so in math, when you start thinking about symmetries, you kind of start with cyclical and shape symmetries. So like, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. 1 going to 2, 2 going to 3, and 3 back to 1 is a cyclical. And then for like a stop sign, which has 8 different sides, there's 16 different ways you can orient it without it being the same thing, where you have 8 different rotations, which is like the top line of the of the stop signs, and the bottom line is those 8 rotations, but with the sign inverted, flipped upside down. So those are like 2 of the more 2-dimensional ways that you can symmetrize different shapes and stuff.
So we are mostly going to be looking at symmetry within tetrahedrons. It's basically a pyramid, but instead of a square base and 4 sides, it's 3 sides and a triangle base. So we're starting with symmetry 3, which is rotation. And basically it's if you take a stick straight through the vertice and turn it, you'll get symmetrics that way. And then we have symmetric 2, which is reflection. This is if you flip it on its side. This one's 120 degrees, right?
This is
180 degrees. And you'll get it multiple times. And then the last one is symmetry 4, which is inversion. So you basically take it and you flip it inside out and flip it the other way, so you end up with the same shape.
So basically what we're doing then is we're taking that sort of symmetry with tetrahedrons and we're kind of putting it into more mathematical terms. And so here we're kind of, what we'll end up doing is applying certain mathematical structures. And in this case, it's a map from like just X to Y and Y to Z and then Z to X. And basically what we're going to be looking for is these patterns where when you apply these certain maps, these things are equal. So in the top example, when you map X to Y and Y to Z and Z to X, you get the same thing, just in a different order, whereas in the bottom one, they're not equal. And so what we're going to end up looking at is where these things are equal when you apply the maps, which is what we call invariance.
So we're going to continue our search of symmetry, and we're mostly going to focus on tetrahedrons as well. And we're going to look at mathematical structures called vertex algebras associated with it.
Yeah, and vertex algebras, they're essentially like, it's a more complicated, multidimensional sort of, I guess, existence in the math world. And we're going to look at different symmetries and invariances in them. And they're very important because they kind of link like different areas of math and physics that we didn't think or didn't know to be linked before. So like group theory and geometry of quantum physics, for example. Thank you. Yes.
As somebody who's old and I first did algebra when I think in the 70s, along with some other people, we had to do everything by hand and with a calculator. What's going to be the balance of the kind of help you're going to get from computers and then how much you're going to have to figure by hand?
It's going to be pretty even, if I'm not mistaken. So we do a lot of calculations by hand, but where we can, we're going to use a program called Wolfram Mathematica to sort of simplify, and like if we derived the formula already, then we'll use the computer to do continuations of that one.
What do you find the most fun about them?
This is a very difficult time.
It's a lot of background. It's a lot of background information right now, and it probably will be for next week as well.
Yeah, I think the reason we're doing it is because it's a lot of conceptual thinking, and so I enjoyed conceptual thinking, so I think that's the most fun thing for me is just the conceptual thinking. Yes.
Professor Shin has a question.
Oh, yes.
Are you calling on me?
Yes, you're good. Go ahead.
Hey, sorry. Yeah, so you mentioned like that you had this, cyclic symmetry
Yes.
analog in algebra. And I'm wondering, there are objects in algebra that have a cyclic symmetry, but then they have, so they're invariant under cyclic permutations. But then if you switch to any two of, switch X and Y or switch Z and Y, it is no longer invariant. Do you know if there's any sort of shape equivalent for that kind of?
I'm not entirely sure. I know there's groups like in group theory that kind of cover those, but I'm not sure if there's any shapes that are similar to that.
Got you. Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
And then I'm myself. You had 3 different symmetries up there, like 2, 3, and 4.
Oh, yes.
Is there a one?
Yeah, so one is just leaving
The
it by
identity.
itself.
It's
Yes.
just the way it is.
Yeah, it's just leaving it as the way it is. But we probably should mention that, but it's not really. It's pretty trivial, so we didn't include it.
So how many permutations in number 2 did I hear you say 183?
No, so symmetry 2 is just rotating
Right.
that tetrahedron by 180 degrees. And so
Got
you get the same thing. And symmetry 3 is rotating it by 120 degrees.
Yeah.
You get the same
Okay.
shape. All right, thank you.
That's it, right? We're good to go. Okay, you guys were fantastic. I apologize about the technology. We will have this way practiced by the time you guys, by the time you run through your practices, and then by the time you do your final presentations. We are going to be in Nichols for final presentations. So that also, I'm much more familiar with the technology there. We'll hopefully be able to set up a few things. So questions, concerns, comments? Yay, Nate, Dr. Warren?
I have some specifics, so I'll just grab you.
Okay. Don't forget tomorrow, library session with Kelsey. And so, did she say if she's doing it by Zoom or here?
I haven't actually heard exactly if she'll be here or remote. I did ask her.
So we will find out. So you may be just doing it by Zoom, because I don't know if she needs to be in the library. And there's no place in the library for everybody to go. So we will find.
Actually, the library is not completely, all floors are now.
No, but for this group.
Oh, for the group?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be.
No, you guys can go and work in the library,
Yes.
but all of us can't be in the library on the same floor together. So, do you have any questions? Let us know. We are hanging out for a little while. There's water over there if you want to grab it. Erin and Louisa will always provide you with water. Thank you all.
All of this is completely unnecessary. It can all be done from the main computer. I just thought when we plugged in the HDMI that was going to be fine.